off last week when we were looking last week at cognitive theory and historical poetics as a challenge to like grand theory or slab theory that Bordwell was talking about. Our topic for today is postmodernism, and we should note this is kind of like another step along the journey from theories of repetition and sameness to theories of plurality. But we should also note that a lot of the writing that we're talking about was kind of happening alongside those theories from last week. So this is less of a step along a kind of trajectory and more a step kind of aside to see what else was happening at the time. So I've got a lot of stuff to cover in today's lecture, beginning with exploring the initial question of what we mean when we say postmodernism. Thinking a little bit briefly about where the term comes from, how it's been used, and then kind of honing in on our focus for today, which is understanding postmodernism as an aesthetic. We'll consider the work of a few different critical voices and hopefully put some of the pieces together into a little bit of a preliminary discussion of Blue Velvet, though I do want to spend most of the tutorials really nutting out the film today, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. So let's begin with this question of postmodernism, postmodernist and postmodernity. Across all of the week's readings, we will get the sense that the term postmodernism is quite slippery and quite difficult to grasp. In fact, in Jameson's Postmodernism and Consumer Society, which is one of the main readings this week, which was written in the mid-1980s, and which I'm going to talk about in a little while, but he actually says right at the start, like the first or second sentence, the concept of postmodernism is not widely accepted or even understood today, which I think is funny. So the term postmodernism has a very long kind of history in studies of painting, such as the work of John Watkins Chapman, who started writing about postmodern painting way back in 1870. In literary studies, through the work of Irving Howe, who wrote about postmodern fiction in 1959. And in architecture, through the work of Charles Jenks, who wrote a very famous book called The Language of Postmodern Architecture in 1977. So one key thing that we need to kind of differentiate this week is between the terms postmodernism and postmodernity. So the term postmodernism does kind of link together a particular historical period and a distinctive aesthetic style. So it might be helpful for you to distinguish between postmodernity as an epoch defined by its relation to the modern, so an epoch after the modern, and distinguish that between a postmodern aesthetic, which would be a kind of key stylistic feature of postmodern artwork or culture. Thinking of postmodernity as an epoch is a little bit of a contentious thing. As I said, there's writing about postmodernism way back in 1870, and there's a lot of different kind of scholarly opinions on when a postmodern epoch might begin. Some scholars would think about postmodernity as the period after modernity, and they conceptualize after modernity. They conceptualize modernity as a period within kind of the rise of industrialization and mass production, so 1940 to 1980. So then they would say postmodernity is after 1980, and they might describe any film that comes after 1980 as a postmodern film. Other scholars would argue that postmodernity occurs kind of alongside a much longer modernity, which actually begins in the Age of Enlightenment. So it is quite contentious, and no one seems to agree on when it started, but also no one really agrees on when it will finish or if it has finished. But today, I guess for the sake of ease, we're really going to consider the 80s and 90s as a kind of key point in this theory today. So postmodernism can be theorized as a discourse or a kind of conceptual grid. It could be thought of as a corpus of texts, and so it would be a group of texts that theorise what the postmodern is, and those which are theorised